Hello, friends. On today's episode, it's all about real estate and divorce. Because let's face it, when love goes south, the house is usually stuck right there in the middle, just sitting there awkwardly, like a third wheel, but with a mortgage, unfortunately. So, do you sell? Do you refinance? Or do you burn it down? No, just kidding. Legally, do not burn it down and don't tell anybody I said burn it down. But lucky for us, we have four amazing real estate agents who cover a great portion of the great state of Florida. They're going to talk to you about different topics. For example, when one spouse goes to closing, or fighting over who gets the pillowcase or their favorite little blankie, or the awkward part where there's someone living in the house or still dwelling there when they're trying to sell it. So grab some coffee, take a break, and get ready to listen to all about our real estate and divorce episode. Welcome back to the Divorce Broadcast. My name is Manny Segarra, coming to you from Miami, Florida. All right. We are very lucky on today's episode to have four amazing real estate agents. I'm going to go ahead and introduce or have them give a brief introduction of who they are. And I'm going to start with the gentleman here at the top of our screen, starting with Lewis and Damien.
Hi, everybody. This is Damien and this is Lewis.
Nice to meet you, folks.
And we are real estate brokers in Miami, Florida, as well as certified divorce real estate experts. We've been doing it for
10 years almost.
Almost 10 years, but specifically in divorce real estate for good 4 years now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on to the channel. We're excited to have you two gentlemen here. We've worked with you before, so it's great to have you here. Up next, we have our superstar from the central portion of the state, Miss Shannon Musgrave. Go ahead, Shannon. Introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm Shannon Musgrave with Keller Williams. I have been in real estate for about 13 years now, and this is my full-time gig. I love it. I love all things real estate, and I work some with IRECH, and that's been wonderful. I cover all of the Metro Orlando area and kind of 4 or 5 surrounding counties.
Sounds great. I know that place is growing in that area. So thank you so much for coming on. We're so happy to have you. And last, and of course, well, not last, second to last, but not least, because we don't never forget about you, Rich. But last, in terms of the real estate agents, and not least, we have our friend, Miss Carrie Negron. Carrie, go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction and thanks for having me. I'm Carrie Negron, and I am a real estate agent with Apex One Realty. I actually started off as an investor up in the Orlando, Central Florida area, and I worked my way down south. I love doing everything real estate, whether you're investing, buying, or selling. I feel like I'm the person. And right now, presently, I'm working with 2 divorced couples. So there you have it.
There you go. It's a perfect topic. All right. And finally, last but not least, our favorite friend of the show. We always drag her around here because she gives such a wonderful insight. Our superstar associate attorney out of Orlando, Florida, Miss IRECH Cologne. Is it still Morales? Because she recently got married. It's still Morales temporarily.
Okay. Still Morales. I haven't legally changed my name. I recently just got married for everybody to know, but it is still Cole Morales. I'm still holding on.
Yes. Thank you for coming on. Congratulations on the nuptials. And I know the little birdie told me that you may be on the market for a home. So that's good. There's this perfect timing because you got 4 people here that can help you out. All right. So before we dive right in, gentlemen, I kind of want to warm the audience up by talking about some of the, just kind of a fun fact of what is the weirdest thing that you have seen a couple either disagree or fight about during a closing on a home, during a divorce proceeding, or maybe just on a closing of a home.
The elephant mailbox.
The elephant mailbox. Okay. I think
there's so many, but that one was pretty funny because from the beginning, the in-spouse was the wife. She was at the home. She was really hard to work with. She didn't want to sell, bottom line, but there was a court order. We had to follow the court order, and going through the attorneys, we were able to get her to cooperate. And but she insisted that she was going to take her elephant mailbox with her. Personally, I don't know anyone who would want the elephant mailbox. If you have seen the elephant mailbox, you would understand. But came closing day, we went to the final walkthrough, and I'm like, well, let's see what kind of mailbox she replaced it with. And when we got there, the elephant mailbox was still there. So I guess it wasn't that important after all.
That's great stuff, Louis. We see that all the time. Thank you for sharing. All right, how about you, Shannon? Any weird or interesting stories that a couple might have fought about?
So it
Item.
wasn't necessarily over an item. She was a real estate license holder, but had never practiced real estate.
Oh,
So I'm sitting across the table at the listing appointment, and she's literally screaming and yelling at him and standing up, flailing her arms because he wouldn't let her sell the house.
wow.
Yeah,
Okay, so you almost had to jump in as a referee on that one. It sounds
yeah,
like.
almost.
Anyway, Miss Carrie LeGrone, how about you?
I would say for me is when you have both parties not agreeing, like just like with the elephant mailbox, not agreeing with certain items. It could be anything from the china to the dining room table. So they have to make a decision. A lot of the stuff is emotional.
Yes.
So, they have to think, I guess, with that business frame of mindset and work towards the same end goal, which is selling the property.
I wish it was that simple, my friend. I
It
wish it was
isn't.
that
I know,
simple.
is it?
Yeah.
Moving on. So the big question in a divorce, and I'll have Irech, why don't you set it up? What happens a lot of times to a marital home when we have these cases?
Yeah, so there's different things that the court can do with the home, a lot of times, and the most popular, especially when both parties are on the title as well as on the mortgage. Number one, it's selling the home. But then there's also the question when there's one party who wants to stay in the home. So it's a question on who gets possession or use of the home until it's sold or until a later date when it gets determined how it'll be divided.
And just kind of to inform the audience a little bit, does the sale of the home happen immediately or does it happen at the end of the case?
Yeah, that's a tough question. It doesn't always often happen in the middle of the divorce proceedings. A lot of times, there is a long period of time until it gets sold, unless the parties agree. If the parties agree and there can be a court order and agreement filed that they both want to sell it, unfortunately, if that's not the case, then you will have to wait to file a motion and have the issue heard before the court and explain to the court why is it so important for it to happen now, versus waiting until the divorce is finalized.
All right, great explanation, Richard. Really appreciate that. All right, I'm going to go to the two gentlemen, Louis and Damien. Twofold question for you. The first question I have is, what are some of the emotional aspects of a sale or a forced sale on a home that you've encountered with couples that are required to sell it either through a court order or because they can't afford it anymore? And then the second part of the question, just to kind of fill it in, is what are some of the red flags that you are looking out for when this situation arises?
Yeah, definitely. A lot of emotions are going through both parties, actually, even though if one doesn't really want to sell the property and stay home for whatever reason, there is a lot of emotion going on. The red flags that we immediately see is, first of all, it's no communication. We call one of the parties and they won't call us back, or the text, they won't reply. Those are the things that are the beginnings of red flags for us. Finally, when we do get in touch with other party to schedule whatever the next steps for the transaction, it's always the time is not right, or it's always the setback. And we try to push through that. And finally, we get the ball rolling. Sometimes we even have to contact the attorneys just to let them know what's going on, because the last thing we want them to think is that we're, leaving things not being done. So we want them to be involved. Communication is very important.
So it's a very delicate balancing scale from it sounds like.
It is.
All right, thank you. All right, Miss Shannon, how about you? Have you come across situations in which maybe one of the spouses is more eager to sell than the other? And what are some of the red flags that you've seen?
I think every person has their own emotional programming that they've got from childhood. And you've got to really almost ask yourself the question, what am I making this mean? Because sometimes we put our own thoughts on something instead of coming from curiosity. So I think asking questions, taking the temperature, the emotional temperature, and the temperature can be different every time you speak to someone because it's an emotional roller coaster that they're going through. So I think the big thing is just kind of taking the temperature, taking your time, being willing to stop and listen, to be patient and empathetic. I mean, I've been through a divorce, and my priority at that point was to do what was the best for my children. And that's not the case with every family. That some couples don't have children, but if there are children involved, you've got to think about what's the first priority to get these kids some stability. And I looked at my situation and I knew I could like duplicate stability somewhere else. So I left and made it easier for my children to have stability in two places.
Well, thank you for sharing the personal story, and also thank you for sharing the insight, because it doesn't seem like one solution fits every case. I think each circumstance is different, and you were able to articulate what in your particular circumstance was the most important. All right, Miss Carrie Negron, how about you?
I think I've been lucky, right? So with the divorced couples that I have been going through where they both wanted to sell, or there was actually two scenarios where they had allowed the other spouse to stay in the house. That was the agreement that they had made from the divorce decree, that the wife on both occasions would stay in the house until the kids got older and they went to high school and whatnot. And then they sold. I think it's very important to make sure you have a great divorce attorney that can protect you and your assets, that they try their best to grant what you want to do during the divorce. And especially when it comes to property, I feel that it's always been more successful when it's in black and white and there's directions and there's no assumptions made. So having the great attorney like you and IREC definitely helps the situation.
That's very kind, and we love the insight. And I guess the four of you sometimes have to wear the hat of like a therapist too, because you got to meet people kind of where they're at. So, Irech and Irech, can you relate to having to step into different roles depending upon the different clients that we have?
Yes, all the time. Every client is different. You know, there can be one client who's pretty independent versus another client who needs a bit more handholding. But we always recommend, honestly, for each client, therapy is a good thing. It helps, and it helps them see the through. But every now and then I gotta wear that hat. So
Yes. So let's talk about some of the good stuff, some of the little interesting stuff. Lewis and Damien, can you give us an idea of like how you approach a situation in which you are court ordered to be the listing agent in a case?
If we're at the point that we've already, listing agreement is signed, properties on the MLS, pictures have been taken, and we've already gone through all that, and we're at just prior to beginning the showings, we have a very focused conversation with the in-spouse, and we explain to them, you know, our expectations.
So who's the in-spouse? Because I know who it is.
The on-property, on-premise spouse, because they're the one that runs the show when it comes to the showings. I mean, ultimately, it's up to them. So, you know, we try to handle them with kid gloves. Damien's way better than I am handling with the kids because there's a court order and we have to, but we do, like, we try to set boundaries. I mean, we try to respect their privacy because it is their home, but we try to say, listen, what days can we show the house? Now, do some of them say, well, only Saturdays from 7 in the evening till 9 p.m.? Like they're trying to sabotage it from the beginning. So we can, you can sort of tell when they're like that. So then we have to tell them, well, listen, we definitely have to have 2 weekdays and you pick the day that you want on the weekend from 10 to 3 o'clock or 10 to 4 o'clock. And then during the week, we have to have access. You know, it depends because maybe they work. So we try to get a key. Maybe they won't give us a key. The scenarios can be so different. So it is challenging, but we eventually end up getting into a groove with each client that we're able to show the house. I think when they come to the realization that it's really happening is that's when they start loosening up and they're like, okay, well, you know, and they get to know us too. And they see we're professionals. Like we're not, you know, we have to explain to them. Somebody didn't want to give us access. Oh, because my jewelry and all this. And we're like, listen, it's not like we open the front door and let people run through your house. We take them room to room. They do not open drawers. They might look in a closet after I open it to see the size of the closet, but they're not doing anything of that nature. And, you know, we're going to take care of your property. So, you know, it changes as it goes on, but it can be challenging.
Sounds good. How about you, Miss Shannon? Did you ever experience any issues with showings or open houses when the couples aren't necessarily getting along?
It happens, of course. And I think the most important time that you spend is up front, setting the stage, setting the expectations, and getting buy-in. If you can show the in spouse what's in it for them, you go back to their motivation. Okay, so you want to be here, you want this done, and you want to be out of this. The longer it takes, the more carry costs there are, the less money there's going to be on the table for you to divide at the end.
That sounds so reasonable. Such great advice. I wonder if they actually follow. I know, Carrie, I think leading up to this, we had discussed that there is an app for showings. Can you explain to the audience I think
So,
with the
yes.
Showtime app, is that what it's called?
There's a Showtime app that realtors use, and it is to make the appointment via the app. And actually, like Shannon had explained it before, that you can give access to both owners and they can deny it or accept it. But at least you include them so that they can see that, oh, my house is being shown, and hopefully the in-spouse is more open to allowing the showings to happen. And just like Shannon had also mentioned earlier, they look at the focus is to sell. So the sooner it happens, guess what? It's more money in your pocket. And it's just hopefully for everyone, it's a happy ending.
Shannon, that is correct. I think you are the resident expert on the Showtime app. You were giving us like all kinds of information. What else do you want to add to what Carrie had explained about the Showtime app, if anything? Because I think you could get notes on the app or something. You were
You
explaining.
can, and you can request feedback, and then you can publish to both owners so that they can see what the feedback is, so that if one of the spouses is leaving the place messy, it shows up. It's documented. It's feedback that's shared and published, and you can, if you're court appointed, then you have that to take back as evidence as well if it's not going well.
Sounds great. We're gonna have to put a link in here for the Showtime app so everyone can kind of become aware of that. We have apps like that in our cases, Rich, like Talking Parents and Our Family Wizard. What are those about?
Yes, those are essentially parenting communication applications that are usually ordered by the court when the parties do have a tough time communicating. So we can usually do by agreement or court order requiring the parties only to communicate through this app. And it kind of makes everybody act right and speak right professionally because they know that at any moment it can be used against them as evidence in court. So I like knowing that there's something like that on the real estate side. So it's good to know.
There's something like that for the home, which is, like we said in the beginning, sometimes caught in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, what about any tips or advice on how to handle the situation when both spouses are in the home? Because that's got to be very awkward.
It is very challenging. How do you think we've been handling it?
It's got to be difficult because a lot of times
this actually the one we have right now, like they like pretty much hate each other and they don't talk to each other.
And they literally live like one part of the house and the other person lives on the other. It's just the weirdest
Like, so
thing.
we have a key for the house.
Yeah.
Like I have a key to get into the gate, then a key to get in the house, and then I have a key to get into the master bedroom where the husband lives. That no one's allowed to go in there except for him.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
You got a key to get into one side of
You
the
gotta
house.
do what you gotta do, yeah.
It's like that old movie in the 80s is War of the Roses. It really is.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I don't know.
stuff.
I think that's past my time. I don't know about that movie.
Oh, wow.
Well, there's a new one. There's a new one
Oh,
coming.
wow.
So you can't say that. All right. So when we were preparing for this meeting, there was something that the four of these wonderful professionals explained to Rich and I that it's interesting. I really didn't think about that. But tell us, Shannon, what happens if you know that there is a divorce or court pending and someone makes an offer on that house? Do you disclose that there's a court proceeding going on?
I do not disclose. It's not my business to tell, and I think it weakens their position as far as what someone may try to offer. If it's damaged the property, disclose. If it's personal business, keep your mouth shut.
Right.
I like that philosophy. How about you, Miss Carrie?
I agree. I think that it's their own personal business, and I would not want to spread what's going on to other clients. It's not their business. And I just think they may think they have an edge of negotiating or, putting a price there. So I'd rather not. I think if you're going to make an offer, you're going to make an offer, and it doesn't matter what's going on between the couple or the seller that's happening to them on a personal level.
Good stuff. And gentlemen, is it in the vault forever and ever, or do you mention the fact that there's court proceedings?
It's a difficult thing because you have a court order to sell a property. So our job when we are appointed by the court to sell the property is to do so. I agree with the ladies that we have a fiduciary duty to our clients to a certain degree. I think that there's certain times, not early in the process. For example, we receive a good offer, everybody agrees on it. We get past the inspection period, which is very important, where after the inspection period, the buyer can't back out without losing their deposit. And now you have a financial period. And then when you get past that, and now we're just waiting on the closing date. Let's say the in-spouse is like, well, they realize now they're going to be out on the street, and they're like, well, I need more time to get out of the house. Oh my God, I need another 30 days. So sometimes we have to give an explanation to a buyer. And at this point that we disclose, in our opinion, if we disclose that, this is a divorce, she's going through a tough time, we haven't in any way jeopardized the transaction as far as what they're going to receive, but we can communicate better with the other side and say, hey, they have kids, these kids are leaving their home they grew up in. They're going to be, come on, can we work out a little 30-day post-occupancy here? Maybe no rent, they'll pay the bill, try to help them by disclosing, not so much hurt them by disclosing.
Got it. Interesting stuff. So another balancing act.
Yes.
Rich, I imagine this could come up too if one of the spouses becomes obstinate and doesn't want to sign the contract within a certain range, right?
Yeah, this has happened to us quite some times where it usually will cause, an urgent motion and letting the judge know, because ultimately, even something as simple as maybe in the initial process where you have like 4 offers on the table, one spouse is okay with an offer, the other spouse is unresponsive, we're stuck because then it doesn't proceed. So usually we will need some court intervention to speed it along.
All right, good stuff. Moving on to the next part. I know this can be a thorn in all 4 of your side, and that is when there are some sort of repair issues on the property, as well as at the end when there's some issues regarding whether or not the prep is handled the right way, if there is any collaboration with the attorneys that are representing the parties for the transaction, and if one spouse is trying to micromanage everything. So let's talk about what happens with repairs. And I think it probably goes across the line, whether it's a divorce or not.
When there's repairs that needs to be done in the property, we definitely tell the both parties what's going on and how this may affect on what offers we will be receiving. Again, if there's one party that wants to stay in the property, they'll definitely say that they're not going to fix anything, that kind of situation. But when it's something that we know that it could be fixable really quick, that we can get it done so that we can get more money for them, we created a fund that we do. We fix the issues quickly, and then we put that also in our closing, so we will get that money back.
They sign up. We have a special form for that, and
Yeah.
we pay the repairs up front.
Yeah,
Oh,
we pay
I like that.
upfront.
Elephant mailbox, that was one particular one. They had a roof issue.
Right.
Because if you don't have a clear 4-point, you can't get insurance. You're not getting an approved loan. So sometimes it's real simple stuff like double taps in an electrical panel. Maybe the air conditioning needs something, some simple things. Up to a certain limit, we'll cover the expense and we'll get reimbursed. They obviously sign something and we get reimbursed at closing.
Sometimes the seller, they can't afford it. They don't have the money to do it.
They're
And
both
they'll have the money at closing, but
Yeah.
they don't have the money at that moment. So we have this program that we help out.
That's really wonderful that you work with people like that. How about you, Shannon?
I always try to go through everything. I had a home recently with a couple divorcing, and they mentioned a lien for an AC, but they failed to remind me that they had also put a lien on the house with a water softener. And
Ooh.
so it was clear that all parties were not on the same page. So we provided the receipt to the title company for that lien, and we had the title company pay it off directly in order to protect one of the spouses from taking a huge hit and having to pay the whole lien after proceeds were split.
Oh, okay. Interesting stuff. How about you, Carrie?
Right now, with one of my listings, and there were repairs that had to be done. I was actually fortunate where the in spouse talked to the out spouse. I guess that's what we can call him. And in the beginning, he did not want to make any repairs. And she was very strong. And she said, listen, fine, you don't want to make any repairs, but you know what? It's going to come out of your pocket at closing. And guess what? He got in there one weekend and he rolled his sleeves up and he did whatever had to be done. I guess it depends on the couple. It depends again on what type of communication they're having. It depends on the situation.
I'm loving this. So we have three different options. We have the gentleman who in-house can assist some of the repairs through their company. Shannon was able to get the title company to do it. Carrie's client did it on their own. And if that all fails, Irech, what can we do in court?
Yeah, well, like I said, then it leads to an urgent motion because a lot of
Right.
times, if the parties can't decide, there's a court and there's a process where the judge decides for you, right? And they can require either one of the spouses, they can require the spouses to equally divide it. And they can even make a decision on, is this repair necessary, right, to sell the home, or maybe it's an as is contract and it sells as is. So yeah, usually we will cede to the judge. I mean, we even had an issue with liens. There's a spouse that didn't know about the liens on the property, but we let the court know and then they resolve it for you.
You mean one of the spouses may have forged the other spouse's signature and tried to get some sort of service and repair done on the house in Miami? No way, Rich. I can't believe it. I will say this though, and maybe Rich, you can tell me if this is kind of true. Normally, the courts will deal with urgent motions that have to do with children before anything. But there is a trend with these sales that are pending because they don't like to see the equity or the value of the asset go down. So I've been seeing more and more where the courts will schedule those motions. How about you?
Yeah, I agree. I've actually been pleasantly surprised, when we have filed the motion and the court immediately wishes to address it, even if it's not a full-blown evidentiary hearing. Maybe it's just a case management, which means just updating the court on the status. And even then, they wanna address it because you're right. If it takes long, they miss out on an offer, and then it's everybody's in worse hands at that point.
So make sure the four of you go back to the attorneys you're working with. Tell them that Irech is telling you to push them to get the case in court because it is a thing that could probably happen. So I'm gonna go around the room again. What would you or each of you wish people would know prior to listing their house for sale?
Well, for us, if there's any other liens on the property, would be nice. We are able to check without pulling title some things. For example, down here in Miami, you get a lot of people, like you'll see an older home and we'll pull up and right away I'll see it has a new roof and impact windows. And when you go in the house has no updating. There's a good chance that they use a PACE program or a wide green program. And somebody came and knocked on their door and told them, hey, you want new windows and new roof? And they're like, yeah, great. You don't have to pay for it now. It'll go into your taxes. And then lo and behold, the next tax year, they're paying $3,000 more for the next 30 years. They like triple charge them for a roof and impacts. But it's something that they have to pay at closing. It can't be assumed by the buyer. So these are important things, especially if you're working very tight numbers and, there's a marital settlement, there's 50-50. You could walk out of a closing having to contribute from our commission just to be able to close, let alone for the spouses to get any money. And for them, the important thing is, a lot of them, that money they're going to get from the equity they're going to get is what they're going to start their life off with. To find out at the last minute they're not getting anything is pretty sad, and we don't want to be culprits in that. And part of our job is to make sure we know that they're going to get something,
That's great advice because you want to make sure that they're careful how they encumber their property, I guess is what you're saying. Like, don't just all of a sudden sign something when someone comes knocking on your door, right?
Yeah.
All right, Shannon, what do you wish people knew or know prior to listing their property up there in Central Florida, which is a little bit different market than Miami, so it might be a little bit different thought process?
It's probably pretty similar, just some nuances. So obviously disclose. If you disclose damage that you know about up front, it gives the buyer less room to negotiate and leverage against you after inspection. Because if you've told them up front, everything and they come back with that list of everything, you can say, "Oh, we told you about that up front." And so it helps you come from a stronger position in negotiating, but things can be, I mean, I had a transaction recently. Had an SBA loan, a water softener lien, a solar lien, an IRS lien, and was a short sale.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
And it took a lot of patience. So that's what I would tell people, that in real estate, there are people involved. It's a legal process. There are going to be complications. There are going to be hiccups. It is not the end of the world. Take a breath, don't panic, and we'll get through it one step at a time.
Love it. These water softeners, man. I didn't know that was really a thing.
All over the place.
All right, Miss Carrie, how about you? What do you wish people knew prior to listing their properties?
That everything should be in black and white. So there's no assumptions made. If there's a court order to sell the house, then make sure probably right there in the court order where the judge has that the in-spouse agrees with the showings, the in-spouse and the out-spouse agrees to the repairs, or, to make things in unison so it makes the process easier.
All right. And what about you, Rich? Is there anything that you wish people knew prior to getting a divorce and having to sell a house? I guess there's a little bit of twist on the question.
I mean, I think it's just mentally preparing them for the fact that that will be an option on the table, right? And a lot of times when the court requires or forces a party to have to sell their home, especially at the end of the divorce, like we go to a final hearing and all this time they've been hoping and praying, and then it's actually mentally preparing them that if they are both on title and on the mortgage, that it is a possibility. And at that point, sometimes I wish for our clients is that they also do their own research, right? Like in the event that I do need to leave the house, like what are the options that I look forward to for their own sake or their kids' sake, so that when the time comes, they're not surprised as what is the rental cost or what is a sale price cost, and etc.
That is so hard to do, because I think a lot of times when people walk down that aisle and say, I do, they really think it's forever, especially when they start having kids. So when that home gets put in a position where it may be sold, a lot of people have that personal attachment to it, especially when they have kids and the fur babies and all that stuff. That's a hard one sometimes. It's a hard conversation. And we know from experience, as I'm sure the four of you know as well. All right, so we're up to my favorite part of this episode. This is a part where we ask the four of you, what can the attorneys out there in the world do to help all of you make these transactions a little bit easier, especially when it comes to divorcing clients? So go ahead, gentlemen.
The orders.
Yes.
The orders. It's all about the orders.
Louis and I created a form that we give out to attorneys. It's like 10 lines of verbiage that we give to attorneys that they can use when creating a court order. And each of those lines pertain to, the whole listing of the property. And it helps us because, we want to make everything black and white.
Like Carrie said.
Keep communication and keep everything clear. And by doing this, when we found that when attorneys use these lines in their court orders, it helps us out tremendously.
I bet. And we always love to help, everybody that we possibly can, including our brethren, members of the bar. So, if you guys, gentlemen, would be kind of, we can do a link to that language so that everyone can have it. Absolutely. If not, we'll do our own link. But I think that point is spot on. How about you, Shannon? What do you think us attorneys can do to help make your life a little bit easier?
I think just an upfront conversation. Hey, here's our situation. Here's what you're going into. Here's the situation where you're walking into, so that I can mentally prepare and be ready for the objections.
I love that tidbit of advice, Shannon, because nowadays people are always texting and emailing. A lot of times they don't bother to pick up the phone and just give a call, because it would be so much easier and better to kind of get on the same page. And I know Rich is kind of old school like that. She's always calling people and talking to them. He is. Trying to negotiate them down and stuff. That's why she's great at what she does. All right, Miss Carrie, how about you?
I'm going to go back to making sure that everything's in black and white, because there's going to be, listen, divorce is already uncomfortable as it is, right? So you're going to always have one spouse bickering over the other. I mean, that's just the fact of it, because if they got along, they wouldn't be getting divorced. So the best thing next to that is when you have the judge, when you have both attorneys, put it in writing and say, listen, we got the order that you need to sell the house, and this is how it's going to happen. If you guys aren't going to work together, guess what? Just like Lewis and Damien says, we have a list right here between the showings, the repairs, when you receive offers. This is the guideline that's going to be followed.
That is
So.
great insight from all four of you. Rich, I know that some firms, I don't want to give away too much of the secret sauce, do some sort of confidentiality agreements when there's sales like this. What are some of the things that should be in those confidentiality agreements so that we can make sure that the sale process goes as smoothly as possible?
Yes, of course. So usually in a court order, you don't want to put specific guidelines, especially when it comes to accepting certain purchase prices, because it will ruin the marketability of that house since it is a public record. So a lot of times a confidential agreement is essentially a stipulation between the parties that will indicate either reduction in price over a certain period of time, maybe it's a percentage, also accepting a listing price or accepting a offer that's within a certain percentage of the listing price. And even for the showings too, we like to have more specifics, and then as well as any kind of showing requirements, things that the public doesn't really need to know about, but that we can use for our purposes for enforcement. And then we wouldn't have to file that agreement at all unless we do need to file an urgent motion or indicate that a client isn't complying with that agreement.
Those are all fantastic points. So we make sure to put in there that if one of the spouses likes to watch TV in their boxer shorts during showings, they cannot do it during a showing in a case. During our production meeting, I know that Lewis had mentioned the importance of having some language that would allow for an acceptance within a certain percentage. Why is that important, Lewis?
Because sometimes they don't want to cooperate. We're bringing them a good offer. We're not hired just to sell. We're hired because we're experienced and we know the value of the home. And when we price a home, we don't price it at what we think it's going to sell for. We price it at a list price, leaving us room for negotiation to be able to find the sale price. So when you have a percentage set, it makes it a lot easier, especially when you have one spouse that's not cooperating, where we know if we get in within that range, they are basically have to accept the offer. It's very helpful. And because listen, we're not there to sabotage them. And to the contrary, the more a seller makes, the more we make as agents, just being regular agents.
One of the lines that we have in our list is that the seller has to accept an offer that is at least 3% of the asking price. And that alone helps us because, we might have one of the parties that's just fixated on the asking price. And with this verbiage in the court order, that gives us, to say, listen, we have this offer that's 3% closest to the asking price. So, and it's a good offer. So that gives the attorneys proof that they should accept that offer.
I'd like to say that right after hearing both of you, both counsel here, I definitely want to add the confidentiality agreement to our list.
Right.
I think that it's important because it's very true. Our order, we're not attorneys, but we love your insight because that's so true. You're compromising a seller's position if all these details are known. Now, I don't think that there's that many agents out there hunting the family law docket to see if there's something, but there's a possibility that somebody gets their hands on it and it could put us in a weak position. I think having a confidentiality agreement in place and using the terms, some of the stuff we have on our list together, man, that's fire right there. That's like the way to go.
Good stuff. And I know, just to kind of wrap up on the point, post-COVID, most of the time they're not coming in at or over the asking price. Now there's room for negotiation, right?
Buyer's market right now. I don't know about Orlando, but I'm sure Carrie can agree down here. It's rough, slim pickings when it comes to good buyers,
Okay, so now moving on to the next part of this episode, we're going to talk about when the deed is done and the splitting of the sales proceeds. All right, Shannon, we get there, you list the property, you sell it, you show it a million times or hopefully less. You are able to get the couple to agree. The sale goes down. How are the proceeds divided? What happens?
I think that's more mandated by their divorce decree or mediation agreement or whatever you guys have negotiated.
Can you tell the audience what a closing is? Because a lot of times people might not
Sure.
necessarily know what it is. And I know that all of you have experience in this.
So at a closing, they typically hold the buyer on at one time and the seller at a different time now. They don't hold them in the same room to close together anymore. The seller signs away their rights to the warranty deed. It's not changed until the buyer's funds have come in and they've funded. The buyer signs their mortgage, their promissory note, all of the warranty deed information, all of the promise to pay documents, all of that kind of thing. And then the title company settles up, pays off any outstanding mortgage, any outstanding liens, prorated taxes, prorated property taxes, all of that kind of thing, and then disperses the remaining funds to the sellers.
And that's when the deal is done. That's when hopefully
When the
you
deal
get
is
paid
done.
as well, and everyone
That's
goes in to happy hour, I guess. Carrie, how about you in terms of closing? What is your thoughts about hiring a real estate attorney at that tail end? Do you think it's helpful for clients to have representation for the closing, like a real estate attorney, or do you have any particular thoughts either way?
My particular point of view is always have a real estate attorney to represent you because you just never know. And they are more in depth with legal terms than I am. I think that would be the best bet.
All right. And gentlemen, what are some of the issues that you may have encountered during closings on these contested divorce cases?
Not enough money to close.
Oh, no.
It happens.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Yes, it has happened. Like you want to blame yourself, but at the same time, you're like, well, wait a minute. You want to trust people. Then all of a sudden you find out all these hidden liens and you get caught off guard because like, when you have a conversation, you see how strapped they are. Then you might do like a lien search saying, let me check because these people they seem like they're really overreaching on their financing. And then you have like this monstrous house in a great neighborhood with, beautiful landscaping, all these things. And that's the one that they're upside down. They owe a mortgage, they owe this, they have this, you just never know. So that's one of the things definitely to watch out for. I think that it's important that you do at least offer to the clients representation because, you're handy in Miami, the buyer puts title on the contract. So it's the buyer's title company is eventually going to be the one you have to give the settlement agreement to or whatever. And a lot of times the title companies and the agents have a relationship already. So, we're putting it out there already that these people are getting divorced and maybe we didn't tell them in the first place. So, and we always use the same title company that's worked with us on all our divorce transactions. They know to get the court orders, the final judgments, the marital settlement agreement, whatever it may be. They know what to look out for. So they're good at what they do. And, we're trying to do the best for our clients.
I think that's a great piece of advice. All right, Shannon, you opened up this can of worms about the closing, so it's great. 2 questions. Number one, I think it's different in Central Florida. The seller picks the title agent?
Seller selects title.
Okay, wonderful. Do you believe that to be better, worse?
I prefer it. I've not experienced the other, but I do have a very good relationship with my title company. And she also, since seller picks and I'm the listing agent, it helps me get a head start on finding out if there's anything that we don't expect to find.
Interesting stuff. And your vote in terms of whether or not they should be represented by counsel at the end in the closing.
I think it depends on the situation. I am a big fan of having a realtor represent you. And if there's an attorney involved in the title company that handles real estate law, I think that's an appropriate path.
Good stuff. All right. And I'll close the loop by asking Miss Irech Colón-Morales, what are some of the legalities at closing that we're always on top of? I know that you're always on top. I think you have some of these closing agents on speed dial. So what are some of the issues that we deal with on our end, on the legal side?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I've had to give out my personal number a couple times just to make sure these deals go through. I will say the proceeds is always the most difficult part too, especially the division of the proceeds. A lot of times, even sometimes when I over communicate and send the court order, initially for the title agent, a lot of times they tend to forget. So most of the time I'm like, hey, FYI, like proceeds, a lot of times if there's an issue with how the proceeds are going to be divided between the spouses, usually and 90% of the time we're dividing the proceeds 50-50, and then each amount is going into the escrow account out for each attorney. So the clients usually don't even see that money until there's a determination by the court or the parties agree. I mean, a lot of times we can do like an interim distribution. So maybe a small portion will go to them, but the rest is held in trust pending final determination, which does make, the pressure and a lot of tension in the middle of the litigation.
They have to wait a lot. The other little nuance point that I kind of want to talk about a little bit would be during a mediation, when you have a property as part of the equitable distribution scheme, what are some of the discounts that you may want to take on the sale of the property or on the value of the property when you're handling a mediation? Can you explain to the audience that part of it?
Yes. So for purposes of, I guess, deductions and taxes. So obviously, depending on if the parties, I'm not a tax expert, but a lot of times, everybody's aware of the homestead deduction, especially when they're either filing taxes together or not. Sometimes that's something that we need to figure out, who's going to be taking that deduction in order to help them in the long run.
The homestead exemption.
Exemption. I'm sorry. The exemption. Okay. The homestead exemption, in order to be a part of their tax deductions. And at the end of the day, too, is if there's repairs on the home, that's something that we also want to know because it'll help in the long run when closing on the house.
And then the bad word, what do they call it? Capital something or another?
Yes,
capital gains.
The capital gains. Yes. Obviously, that's the big elephant in the room a lot of times that most people won't account for, so there's always one party that's going to take the hit, or we have to decide how they're going to divide it. Once the house gets sold, it's going to be dependent on, how much they purchased the property for at the beginning.
Yes, definitely. Great points. Cautionary tale for all of the members of the bar. You got to remember those capital gains and maybe negotiate away the 6%, 5% commission and any closing costs at the time of mediation. All right, we're almost about to sign off. But before we do, I want to give all of you a chance to see if there's any questions in particular that you may have for either Irech or I.
Yes, I have a question. What percentage of cases that you handle would you say that you are being paid your fees from the sale of the property? That's my question.
That's a good one.
That is a good question.
Reg, don't disconnect all of a sudden. You better into the damn question.
Yes. I would say that it is a lower percentage only because a lot of times for there to be a sale of a home, you really have to wait sometimes a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And unfortunately, it's just really hard to front the cost of a case and not get any type of payment until that happens. So that dissuades a lot. And I'm not answering just for us. I think for a lot of attorneys, it's a little bit difficult to have to carry that. There are some cases that we've had together that have lasted a year, 2 years, and nothing's happened on the case yet. So that's the hard part. What do you think, Irech?
Yeah, I just think it's not very sustainable in the long run. I mean, usually because as Manny said, it takes a long time before, there's a determination. I mean, there's tons of times where, we have proceeds held in trust for a year, 2 years because the parties just can't seem to agree, or we're waiting for a final hearing date. So for us to wait that long, so it doesn't happen often, and it's usually like an extreme circumstance that we would opt for that.
And these judges, they have these calendars that are so backed up because of the amount of cases that they're handling. And by the time you get a final hearing in front of them, it could be a year later. Like they're scheduling now in one of the counties, they're scheduling final hearings in February and March right now.
Oh.
So it's hard. It's hard to do.
So as a real estate agent, what can I do to help make your job dealing with a piece of property that has to be liquidated? What can I do to make your job easier?
I mean, you guys, I think it's been a theme throughout this whole time where communication is honestly very, very key. A lot of times there's things that as realtors and real estate experts that you can probably handle and answer much better for the clients than ourselves, So I think the best way to help us is definitely, like you said, Shannon, disclose. So if there's an issue, let's say you're trying to sign the listing agreement, right? And let's say they're not in agreement with the listing price they want to put in that agreement. It's so important to let us know immediately instead of letting it wait and simmer, because then we can address it sooner rather than later. Because like Manny said, by the time we address it, and let's say we need to have the judge intervene, we're waiting sometimes weeks or, multiple days for it to be resolved. So I think that's the most important part, and just keeping us up to date with the transaction. So it's not like 3 weeks have gone by and we're like, I have, so I wonder if there's any offers on the property, So I think that's my takeaway.
I think that is absolutely on point. If it was up to me, because the way that we run our office here is that we're always having meetings on, daily meetings, weekly meetings, monthly meetings. If there's a way for all of you to incorporate us in whatever your process is, I don't know how often you check in with clients to give them updates on like showings and offers and, here are the issues. If you can include us in that loop, I think that would be wonderful, because then we could get ahead of it, or we can help you get ahead of it, because you would have another person on top of that person trying to get them to cooperate to do X, Y, and Z. Or if the one spouse is refusing to list the property, we would file a motion immediately for contempt and enforcement or whatever to try to motivate to do them. Keep us in the loop weekly, bi-weekly, every couple of weeks. Just check in with us and let us know what's going on so that we can help you, because we're all on the same page. We're all, part of the same team. Good. Great questions. We're about to wrap up. Before we do, we want to thank all of you for coming on. I think that your insight, your wisdom, and all of your feedback has been invaluable, not just to us, because, we really appreciate you guys on both a friendship level and a respect level, but to everybody that watches this channel that's a little bit nervous about what's going to happen with their home. So we want to, as a thank you, want to make sure that each and every one of you gets a chance to tell us again who you are, your phone number or contact number, as well if you have a website. I'm going to start with Carrie. And then why don't you give us a one-liner takeaway? And it'll be something like this. If you can give a divorcing couple one tip of advice, what would it be? So let's start off with you giving us your contact information and then your one-liner.
Okay. I'm Carrie Negron with Apex One Realty. You can reach me at 305-518-9352. I'm on Instagram at Apex1M or Carrie_M. And my one-liner piece of advice is, when you're going through this divorce, treat it like a business. So you want to make money in the end.
Very well said. All right, Shannon.
Sure thing. I'm Shannon Musgrave. I am a real estate agent with Keller Williams. My phone number is 407-394-3631. And forgiveness is a choice that you make for yourself, not for the other person.
All right. I like that. Empowerment. Empowerment to be able to move on despite what the other party says. Yep. Gentlemen.
Well, my name is Damian Grass, a broker at the Grass Tamayo Group. This is my associate, Luis Tamayo. And our phone number is 305-298-8327. Lewis's phone number is
305-608-5617.
Our website is Grass Tamayo Group. You can find us there. And our one-liner is
always remember the children.
Yeah, especially in a divorce. If there's kids involved, always think about them. It's very important.
That's very great advice. All right. And finally, last but not least, Iraj Morales, we know where to reach you. But give us your one-liner, one piece of advice and takeaway to divorcing couples in the middle of a divorce proceeding.
Oh my God, this is a tough one. I did not consider, but one thing that I have mentioned to a couple people is a lot of times is remembering that the person you married is not the same person you're divorcing. So I think that's my one-liner.
Good stuff. All right. So to the five of you, thank you so much for coming on. This has been such a great experience, and there's been such great information shared. Thank you from the bottom of my heart, and we look forward to seeing you soon. For the rest of you out there, please, if you know anyone that is going through a divorce case and needs some real estate advice and tips, look some of these people up. They really know what it is that they're doing. And if you got a court case going on, look us up at www.segarralawfirm.com. We have offices in Miami and Orlando, Florida. Se habla español. Do us a favor and like this video. Subscribe to the Divorce Broadcast, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you. Bye. That was awesome, man.
Bye.